Welcome to the program. I'm Nicole Fröhlich. Ukraine's peace negotiator Rustem Umerov has said the second day of talks aimed at bringing an end to Russia's war achieved real progress. He and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy are in Berlin for meetings with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Zelenskyy just met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz at the Chancellery. Merz emphasized that the legal and material guarantees the U.S. has put on the table are considerable, and the talks offer the biggest chance yet for peace in Ukraine. Zelenskyy agreed that these guarantees are crucial to any ceasefire. The two leaders will now sit down for dinner with other European leaders. Bring in DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, who was at that press conference. She's still in that room there in Berlin. Michaela, Zelenskyy says negotiations are going well. How far along are we? And do we know what's missing in order to be able to move forward?
Well, how far we are depends on who you ask. We are hearing from American official circles saying that 90% of the issues between Ukraine and Russia were addressed in those talks, that the U.S. had given a very meaningful and substantial security guarantees. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in this press conference here himself, raised the question. First of all, he praised that they are near Article 5 NATO guarantees. So this is kind of what he wants. But what this will translate like off the paper, that is still being shaped as we speak, once there is the question of who has boots on the ground, where the contact line is, which territories Ukraine may have to concede, particularly in the Donbass region, where the Russian demand, of course, is that Ukraine hand over territory that it still has control over. So these are very contentious issues. All sides are praising these talks as a major step forward. And Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, said, look, now it's all up to Moscow whether any kind of meaningful talks, constructive talks can start. Because one thing is clear to everybody sitting around the table, that without the Russian side at the table, no real progress can be made.
Chancellor Merz also praised the U.S. side for offering substantial, as he called them, security guarantees. Any details on what those could look like?
Well, we're hearing from the U.S. side that these are indeed very substantial, but the word substantial, we can do the semantics now. Does that translate into potentially boots on the ground? We've recently seen that the U.S. is very skeptical of Europe. At the same time, a law was passed that the troop numbers will not go below just under 80,000 U.S. troops here in Europe. But it seems at this point so unimaginable that a U.S. soldier would actually cross into Ukrainian territory. That's ideally what Volodymyr Zelenskyy wants to see. And this is still what is being debated. We're also learning that a lot of time will be taken the next weekend to look in detail at maps. But again, the big question thrown open here is what will be the initial response out of Moscow be? And this is where the European side really doesn't expect a real will to enter meaningful talks.
Germany's, of course, hosting these talks. Do you get the sense that Germany's stepping up its game, and maybe more importantly, that they're being listened to on the international stage where it matters in this conflict?
Look, the real success for Germany, for Europe, is that they have a seat at the table here. A whole host of European leaders, also the NATO Secretary General, are here in the Chancellor to have kind of a post-negotiations talk and to show their support to Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So the Europeans are at the table. Germany is taking the lead there. And the big test is now the European summit on Thursday, where the EU leaders can find the unity to decide to tap into those frozen assets worth almost 200 billion euros.
That's DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner. Many thanks. And we can now speak to Orysia Lutsevych. She's the deputy director of the Russia and Eurasia program and head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House, and joins us from London. Good to have you back on DW. Now, the U.S. delegation says significant progress was made. Would you agree? Did they move the process forward, or mainly relay Russia's demands to Zelenskyy in person?
Well, Nicole, I think it depends on what U.S. delegation is referring to. If indeed this is something where they are speaking about U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine and for the same matter for Europe, that is worth paying attention to. There's also information that such a possible security treaty will be voted in the U.S. Senate, which will give it a much stronger backing, a legal base. If they are referring to other issues, that is hard to tell because, like you say, much also depends whether Moscow will accept such security guarantees or they will rewind back talking about the preconditions of this war as the enlargement of NATO, as NATO expansion, as Ukraine being neutral, meaning not having any security guarantees.
I want to look at the Russian side in a second, but first I want to zoom in on something that the German Chancellor said. He said it was time to focus on the price of peace. And one could really argue that Kyiv has been paying that price for years now. But when it comes to making concessions to get a peace deal over the line, how far do you think Volodymyr Zelenskyy would be willing and able to go at this point in time?
Volodymyr Zelenskyy has a real conundrum because he has United States actually pushing Ukraine to concede its sovereign territory. I don't think if there's any example like that in European history to an aggressor without a fight. And quite a significant number because if you look at the size of Donetsk region, Russia still under the current pace will have to have 3 years of fighting to occupy what Americans asking Ukrainians to give to Russia. And let's remember, these are big cities, the centers of machine building, glass production, chemicals. This is Ukraine's industrial base. But also, it sets a huge international precedent where a nuclear power can demand a piece of territory of the neighbor, even if it's failing to achieve it militarily. So this puts our whole world in a big risk.
Zelenskyy has signaled openness to compromise on NATO membership. What would security guarantees have to look like that would be comparable to Article 5 protections like those that Zelenskyy has been seeking for years now?
Well, what NATO is, it's a collective defense alliance. It means if there's attack on NATO member, the member states consider it attack on themselves. So it has to be a similar agreement where if Russia attacks Ukraine, this would be considered an attack on US, Germany, UK, France, and all those signatories of a possible security treaty for Ukraine. That also means that there are no restrictions on what kind of armaments Ukraine can procure, the range of those armaments, in order to build a credible future deterrence. Because let's remember, Russia has completely destroyed any deterrence posture because it has decided to invade Ukraine. This is the type of security guarantee Ukrainian people and Zelenskyy are seeking.
Is that the type of security guarantees that Ukraine's Western allies would be willing to give?
Well, this is a big question because we do not have details about those security guarantees at this point as we are speaking. We only know that the conversation about them continues.
Would any concession, whether it be territory, NATO membership, would it be enough to get Russia to agree to a deal, or will Moscow just keep moving the goalposts?
I think it's important to remember that until President Putin is in the Kremlin and this very violent militarist ideology of gathering Russian historic land, because let's remember, Russia positions this war as a defensive war, as the war where they are actually correcting the historical mistakes of the collapse of the Soviet Union, will continue. It will be a very dangerous time because even if there is a peace deal and a ceasefire in Ukraine, the aggressor will be rewarded. So it will matter enormously what we will do collectively in Ukraine and in Europe the day after any kind of an agreement with Putin's Russia.
All of that said, critics argue that the United States continues pushing Ukraine to accept terms Moscow wants. And I want to get your perspective on this. Is Washington prioritizing a quick end to the war here over Ukraine's long-term security?
Yes, Nicole, they are, because President Trump wants to show something to his voters 1 year after inauguration. He has already violated his electoral promise that he will solve this war in 24 hours. He has backtracked on this, saying it will be difficult to solve this war, but he still pushes for any kind of resolution. And he's interested in opening up economic relations with the Kremlin, with bilateral US-Russia business.
He has expressed frustration in the past, and especially in the past couple of weeks, with both sides over the lack of a resolution to this conflict. The U.S. has threatened repeatedly that Washington might step back from mediation if talks stalled. That hasn't happened so far. Why do you think the U.S. is still engaged? Is it all of these reasons that you just pointed out? Is it because Donald Trump wants a win, or is there more to it?
Well, it's one of the biggest security issues right now in the world. This is one of the high intensity wars in the world. There's no bigger war going on right now anywhere. So if Trump wants to show that he is a real global mediator, as he repeatedly says, then it will be a failure for him if this aggression does not stop. I guess the black swan for him was such a resolute position of Europe. He probably didn't expect Europe to back Ukraine, as we've seen today. Chancellor Merz actually sitting not at the helm of the table, but next to President Zelenskyy, clearly showing that Europe stands with Ukraine, and it matters how the war is ending, not just it ends in any way.
Orysia Lutsevych, head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. Thank you so much, Orysia.